Hello and welcome back. So today we are going to be diving into functions in JavaScript. So when we write code, quite often we need to perform a similar action in many places of the script, and that is where functions come in. Functions are the main building blocks of any program, okay? Not just JavaScript. They allow a code block to be called many times without having to rewrite them, okay? And we have already seen examples of functions, okay? You remember we use console.log to output information to the browser's developer console or the terminal, depending on where the JavaScript is being executed, okay? And we also have the number function, okay? But we can actually create functions of our own, okay? And we are going to be seeing a lot of functions in this class. So let's dive into the Visual Studio Code and start coding. So I'm going to use the some of the examples that I mentioned. Console.log. We can say something like hi. And as you can see, we just output hi to the developer console. So basically, we can create our own functions using different methods, okay? To create a functions, oftentimes we can do something that we call a function declaration. And as you can see here, we can do something like function, let's say show show item. Okay. So the function keyword goes first, and then we have the name of the function. Okay. So we can say something like let item equals let's say cats, okay, and we can say something like console.log that should be, let's say, item. Let's put item inside that, and let's call this function show item. Okay, so if we save this, you can see, right, we have cats. Another thing that you're going to notice here is this parenthesis, okay, and we usually have a list of parameters between the parentheses, which are separated by a comma, okay? We could have something like, let's say, A, comma, B, okay? But in this case, the parenthesis is empty, okay? So basically, we don't have any parameters passed into these functions, into this function. And also, we can see we have the function body, which is basically between the curly braces, okay? And it is as simple as that. One other thing to note is that this variable that was declared within this function can only be accessed within this function. It cannot be accessed outside of this function, okay? We cannot come outside and say console.log item. That is not going to work, okay? It's going to throw an error, okay? As you can see, right? It says reference error, item is not defined. And that is because we never declared item out in the global scope. We only declared it within this function scope, okay? And that is why we were able to access it in this place, okay? But a function declared like this function here could access any, or let me paraphrase that. A function can access any variable that is declared in its global scope, okay? So we can say something like let item name equals, say something like dog, okay? And I can come here and say console.log dog, actually item name, okay? So if I come here, now I'm calling this function. If I come here, it's going to output both cat and dog, because cat was declared within this function and dog was declared, item name was declared outside of this function, okay? So we can access both the inner and the outer variables, okay? Awesome. Another thing to note is that this function can actually modify a variable that was defined outside of its scope, okay? So as you can see here, we have item name is equal to dog, right? So we can come inside this variable and say, instead of directly using this item name, we could reassign it and say item name equals, let's say, something like, okay, let's say goats. and then let's come out here. You can see, right? Now item name is now goat, okay? And if you notice something, let me show you something. We can say console.log item name, and then come here and say console.log again. Let's copy that, come here and say item name again. Let's see what happens. You can see, right? First we have from line 9, we have item name is dog, right? Is equal to dog from this line, because we have not called this function. It is within this function that we were reassigning the variable item name, right? And now it is goat within this function. And then after we then console.log again, we try to log item name to the console. It is no longer dog, it is now goat, okay? So this function also modifies this outer variable name, okay? And that is possible, okay? It is something that we could do. So now let's quickly try another function with some what is it called, parameters, okay? So let's say something like show profile. Let's say show profile. Let's pass in name. So what we pass in is they are basically called arguments, okay? But they are parameters, but their value is arguments. I mean, when we call them, we pass in arguments, okay? The parameters are the things that we have within the function when we declare the function. But then when we call the function, okay, as we are going to see shortly, we are going to pass in some arguments, okay, which are essentially going to be the parameters that the function will use, okay? So now let's do something like what should we do? Okay, let's just console.log let's see, okay, so let's just say something like name. Let's concatenate that with let's bring in a colon, and then let's concatenate that with local, okay? So you can guess, if we call this function, we're going to have something, let's say show profile, okay? Now we're going to call this function with the arguments, okay? So we're going to pass in some arguments. So I'm going to say something like, let's say name is equal to Ruto, okay? And then let's say it's going to follow that order, okay? Let's say location is equal to Texas, okay? Now if I log this to the console, you are going to see, right, it says Ruto, Texas, right? Because that is what I requested for, right? That is what I requested for. So you can see name plus colon, then plus local. Basically, we use this plus to concatenate these strings, okay? So it's as simple as that. One thing though is that, you know, we could use default values, okay, when passing parameters, okay? We could use default values. So we could say something like, you can see here we have local and we don't have anything as default. So we expect that the user will provide the arguments, right? So let's do something like, let's say we have something like this, function show detail. Yeah, show detail. Then let's say we have a name, and then let's say we have okay, so we have local also, same thing, but here we're going to provide a default value, okay? We're going to say the default location is Kenya, okay? Is Kenya. And then within the curly braces, we want to do the same thing we did here. So we're going to put that there, and then we are going to say, let me think. Okay, so let's call this function show detail. So we're just going to pass in name. Let's say map4, okay, map4. So map4 is the argument we are passing when we are calling this function, okay? And what we're going to do now is basically let's see what happens. Then I'm going to explain why we we have whatever thing we get. You see, right? We have map4 equals is in what? Kenya, right? This is the name, this is the location. And that is because we provided a default value, okay? And then here the user does not provide the location. So, but if the user provide the location, let's say the user provides, say, something like Ghana, okay? Then instead of Kenya, we're going to have Ghana. You see, right? It changed to Ghana, okay? So it's as simple as that, okay? It's as simple as that. Although sometimes instead of using the default values, we could do an explicit check of for undefined, okay? And what that means is that if the user failed to provide the location, the locale, like in this case, right? We said it's going to give you the Kenya, the default value, right? And that is because the locale was undefined, okay? When we call this show detail function, locale was undefined. That was not provided. That parameter was not provided, okay? So we could, instead of doing it this way, let me just comment out this one. Let me copy it and then comment it out. So instead of doing it that way, we could do it this way. We could say, let's not have Kenya there. We could say something like this. We could say if locale, we could say if locale is equal undefined, that is straight equality, right? Undefined. Then we want to say that locale should be equal to what? Let's say something like London, okay? Should be equal to London, okay? So now we are going to get the same thing. I mean, we're going to achieve the same results. Now we are not providing, let's say the name here is John, so that we know that it's coming from here. Now let's see what happens. You see, right? It says John is in what? London. And we did not provide the location, but because we check for the undefined value, and then we say, okay, if it is undefined, then the locale should be equal to what? London. And that is why we got this result, okay? That is why we got that result. And also, if you don't want to use the check for undefined, you could also use the or operator, okay? So you could use the or operator. So I'm going to actually let me comment out this again, and I'll just come here, and instead of having this, I'm going to say locale. I don't need this if condition here, so I'm going to just say locale equals locale, or it is equals London, right? Basically here I'm saying that locale should be whatever locale is, okay? That parameter should be locale, what that is provided, right? During when we are calling this function. But in case it is not provided, then it should be using this London, this value, okay? It should be using this value, okay? And so this is going to work just fine. So we're going to say James or Harold, okay? We're going to say Harold, and let's see what happens. You see, right? It says Harold is in what? London. Let's change it so you know that it's working. Let's say is in Nigeria. Okay, so we're going to have Harold, Nigeria, right? So it's as simple as that. So actually, one thing to note is that and okay, before I leave this part, so I can actually put in the arguments for the locale, okay, for the locale parameter, and say this one should be, let's say, California, and it will still use California, okay? You can see, right? It's going to be Harold in California. But when we don't provide the locale parameter argument or parameter, then it will use what? It will use the default one that we have within this or operator, okay? It is as simple as that. Also, modern JavaScript supports the knowledge coalescing operator, okay? So instead of, actually, let's do that. Let's say function, let's say show place. Let's use another name, okay? Show place, and let's say name, okay? We're going to pass in the name of the place, and we're going to just console.log and we're going to have maybe something like name and then this coalescing operator, and then we're going to say the place is let's say Nairobi. Okay, Nairobi, Kenya. Okay, so now if we call this function and say show place, okay, so it's going to be what? It's going to be Nairobi. You can see, right? And that is because we did not provide any arguments. Okay, we did not provide any arguments. We basically just, you know, call the function with an empty parameter. Okay, so I mean with an empty argument, I should say. So if we provide it, then it's going to use it. So let's say it's not Nairobi. Let's say it is South Africa. Okay, so it's going to use South Africa now. Okay, but if we use this knowledge, we can use this knowledge coalescing operator to optionally choose what we're going to throw out. Okay, or how we use this parameter. Okay, so I hope you understand that. Okay, so now let's quickly look at you know, how we can return values from functions. Okay, so oftentimes functions will return a value. Let's use this function to add two items. Let's say a plus b, a and b. So we're going to have those two parameters, and then what do we want to do? We want to return a plus b. Okay, simply return a plus b. So if we come outside and say something like let's just say let result equals that function sum, and then we pass in 4 and let's say 3 as arguments, and then let's console it. Let's log it to the console.log. Let's say results. Okay, so let's see what we get. You see, right? We got 7. Okay, and that is because we have this parameters here, and then what we did with the parameters was simply adding them together. Okay, we're returning the addition of these two parameters, and so when we call the function anywhere in the code, it's basically just going to add whatever arguments we supply together. Okay, it's going to add them and then gives us the result, which is what we have here. Okay, it's as simple as that. And one thing you need to take note of though is that this keyword return can be in any place of the function. Okay, it can be in any place of the function, and when we reach this return, when the execution reaches this return, the function stops. Okay, whenever let's say you have, let me explain what I'm talking about. Let's say you have a lot of things going on here, you know, you have so many calculations going on there. Then once you return, whatever you return is going to be what this function is going to basically return, and it's going to stop there. If you have anything below this return, it's not going to happen. Okay, except you are doing some if else thing, you know, going on there, and you're using return within the if else. Okay, so but it's going to return whatever thing that you are returning with this return keyword. Okay, so it is very important to note that. It is very important to note that. So let's do a quick another example, you know, just to kind of appreciate, you know, functions. So let's age equals let's say 13. Okay, and then let's declare a function, let's say check age, and then we have a parameter age, and let's say if age is greater than or equals to, now we are using the comparison operator, so we're going to do what? We're going to return something. Let's return a boolean, let's say true. Okay, and we want to do s. Actually, we don't need to do s. If you return boolean true, then s is going to be false, so we don't need to do that. So now let's do if, and then let's pass in that function check age. If check age, then let's throw in age. Okay, now we want to console.log We want to console.log, let's say something like access granted. Okay. S, we want to console, let me copy this. We want to console.log access denied. Access denied. Okay. Now let's see what happens. Now we can see what is going on here is this. So we said age is equal to 13, right? You know, in real world application, the user is going to provide the age value, okay? But here, because we are just learning, so I just decide to, you know, declare it as a variable here, okay? And then we have a function that is called check age. This check age is going to take a parameter called age, okay? As you can see, Visual Studio Code is telling us is a parameter, right? It's age, and it can be of any type any. So this is going to return a boolean. Basically, this thing is going to be true or false when it runs, okay? And then we are passing that boolean into this conditional, and then this conditional statement is basically going to utilize console.log access granted or access denied based on the boolean result that we have here, okay? So to excuse me, let's run this and see what we have, because this is where it will all start, right? If we provide a value here, then this will run, and this, and throw this to the console or this, depending on this value, okay? Let's see. You see, right, it says access denied, and that is because 13 is less than 18. It will be true, this will be true only if 13, this value of age, is greater or equal to 18. So if we say it's equal to, let's say 19, it's going to be access granted. You see, right, it says access granted, right? So it's as simple as that. So one thing though, you see that when I name this thing check age, I didn't just, I'm actually checking age, okay? I'm checking age. So I use a name that actually defines what I intend to do with that function. Because functions are actions, okay? They are things that you do. So their name is usually a verb, okay? It should be brief and it should be as accurate as possible and describe what the function does, so that someone that will read your code later on, okay, maybe someone in your team that is going to read your code, we understand what your function is doing. You understand? And it is a common practice to start a function with a verbal prefix, okay, as you can see in this one, check, okay. And this name, we use a camel case. You can see the age is starting with capital letter, then the check is starting with small letter, okay. So this verbal prefix, you know, what it does is that it's kind of describes the action that we are trying to do, okay. So there must be an agreement within, you know, your team, if you are working with it as part of a team, right, on how to name your being it your variables or your functions, okay. So it is very important. So for instance, we could use, as you can see here, we were checking age, and so it's okay to say check age. But if you want to get something, let's say you want to get a value, it would be ideal to start with something like get, you know, get something like get value. Okay, let me just say something like, you know, like this to kind of indicate. So if you want to get, if your function is going to get something, you know, just use get, you know, start it with get, okay. And then if your function is going to calculate something, start it with, you know, calculate, you know, calc, you know, maybe for example, you could do something like calc age, you know, something like that. And then that function, when it runs, is going to basically calculate age. And maybe you want to create something with the function, you can use, you know, create something, you know, just something descriptive, okay, something descriptive. Okay, so let's talk about function expression. So all these things we've been talking about since, all these functions we've been writing since, they are basically function declaration, okay. We are declaring a function, as you can see, right, it starts with the function keyword. But in function expression, actually let me write that, function expression, okay, function expression. Function expression in JavaScript, how should I describe this? So it's a way to define a function using an expression, okay? Often within another expression, because okay, you will see, you'll see more of that later, but I'll just try my best to kind of explain it to you. And instead of using the traditional function that we have here, the traditional function declaration with this keyword, okay, we just use assignment, okay. So basically, function expression involves assigning an anonymous or named function to a variable, okay, and the variable can be used to invoke the function. So let me actually write an example so you see what I'm talking about. So we could say something like let's transform one of the, okay, it doesn't really matter. Let's say show test, just something different, equals function, and then we have a parameter, let's say test, and then so this is a function expression, example of how we do function expression. Console.log, let's use a knowledge coalescing operator, okay. Let's say book, okay. Awesome. So we have something like this, and let's call this function and see what happens. It's going to run just fine, okay. Let's say show test. What should we, let's just throw in something there. Let's say Katie or Katie. Okay, so let's see what happens. You see, right? It says Katie, okay, or Katie, however you choose to pronounce it. Okay, so here we have we are basically assigning a function to this variable, okay. It's like an anonymous function, and then we are storing it in this variable. So then we can use this variable to call this function, okay, and that is what is happening here. And in this case, right, we threw in Katie as the argument. So if we have show test, and then we just call it like that without throwing in anything, you can see, right, because we have the knowledge coalescing operator here, then it's going to show us that this is going to be what? Book. You see, right? It's book here. It's Katie here because we pass in Katie as the argument, and here it's book because we have the knowledge coalescing operator to say that, okay, if the argument was not supplied, then it should be book, okay. It is as simple as that, and function expression is always the choice, when writing modern JavaScript code. So now let's quickly look at callbacks, what we call callback functions. Okay. Okay, so you see, in JavaScript, callbacks are functions that are passed as arguments to other functions, okay, with the intention of having them executed at a later time, okay. I'm going to show you an example. Let's say we have let's balance, and I'm going to basically be using this simple example to kind of illustrate what callback functions are, or what they do, okay. Let's say let broker equals now this is a function expression. Now we are writing our function, with function expression. Let's say stock, let's say buy, let's say sell. Those are the parameters with for this function, or of this function. Let's say if excuse me, if balance, let's say if it's greater or equals to stock, we're just going to do some logic here, okay. Let's say we want to buy stock. We want to call that that callback as the name implies. We want to sell, okay, and I'm going to explain this to you. So you can see it's already giving itself out. Callbacks are functions that are passed as arguments within another function, okay. So now let's define what's some other functions that will be serving as callback, okay. Let's say buy stock equals a function. Then we are going to have let's just console.log, okay, I'm going to start my monster class next week, and you're going to see a lot of functions, okay? So, but you know, slow and steady wins the race. Console.log, what is happening here? Function equals this console.log. Okay, let me write this and see where the error. Oh, I need the colon here. It's a function expression. Console.log. Let me say. Let's say bought some stocks. Okay, bought some stocks. So function. Okay, I was wondering where that error came from. I misspelled the function. Okay, so but yeah, we do need this this colon here. And I don't know if you noticed that colon, we don't have it if we have function declaration. I mean semicolon. You see, right? We don't have that semicolon. Even if I miss this this thing, JavaScript, my Prettier plugin in this Visual Studio Code is going to add this colon, semicolon there. Let's see. Let's try that. You see, right? It's added it here, and that is because this is a function expression. It's like when you write an expression, something like this. It usually ends with a semicolon in JavaScript. But when you have a function declaration like this one, you don't need the the semicolon, and that is something that I thought it's wise that I tell you, okay, so that you know why that is. Okay, so let's do another thing. Let's sell stock. Let's sell stock equals, I misspelled it again, function. I think my eyes just disappointed me there. So here I'm just going to, let's do the similar thing. Let's copy this. Let's paste that. So let's say bought, sold, let's just say sold a few stocks. Okay. So now I'm going to show you what is going to happen here. Now it's going to all start here. You know, depending on this function is going to actually, we need to call it, right? So we need to call this this function and then pass in the callbacks. Okay. So we are going to have something like, let's see how we're going to, okay, let's say broker, and then let's pass in some parameter. Now, since this is a number type, okay, let's do 1,500 as the stock, and then let's pass in the callbacks. So I'm going to pass in, let's see, of course, the function, the callbacks that I have, let's say buy stocks and then sell stocks, okay? So this will be the callback functions, okay? Callback functions. So let's see what happens with this. If the value of stock is 1,500 and the balance is 2,000, okay? Let's see what happens. You see, right? It says bought some stocks, and that is what is happening here. Is this now this function ran, this broker function ran first. It's first ran, and depending on the return value, it's run the callback functions that were provided as arguments into this function, okay? So here we say that if the balance is greater or equal to stock, then it should buy. So basically it's invoking this this buy stock function. But if it is less, it should do what? It should sell. So if we make the stock to be 5,000, that means the balance will be what? Will be less. And let's see what happens. It's going to sell. So it says sold a few stocks. Okay. It says sold a few stocks. So honestly, callbacks they are fundamental concepts in JavaScript, especially in scenarios where you are dealing with tasks that take time to complete, such as fetching data from a server, reading files, or handling user inputs. And honestly, when we start building big applications, you know, like the Monster application I'm going to be starting next week, you're going to see, you know, we're going to be fetching data, we're going to be having data, you know, returned to us, and then we're going to be dealing with that data. So let me actually give you an example of a real world scenario. Let me say this one is example 1. Example 1. We are going to simulate, fetching data from an API. Let's say this is example 1. Yeah, I think that should actually be more interesting, to describe what callbacks are. So let's say something like, let's do a function expression. So let's say function, or let's do function declaration. It doesn't really matter. So let's say function, let's call it, we're going to fetch, okay, let's call it fetch data, okay? Fetch data. We are going to simulate, okay? We are not contacting any API, okay? We are just simulating, okay? We are going to use the set timeout function to simulate that we are calling fetching data from an API. So let's pass in the URL and the callbacks, and then let's say set timeout. The set timeout is here, set timeout, and you can see, right? So we are going to define what we want to do here, okay? So let's say const, let's use the const keyword here, data. Let's define an object, because you most time, right, when you make a contact to an API, you're going to get your data back, as an object, or like JSON, object. So let's say John, and then we have let's say we have age, okay? So let's say age is equal to 30. It doesn't really matter. So now we have the data there. Let's say now, let's use this callback. Then we throw in the data that we just get back from the API. Okay. So now the timeouts, let's give it like 1000 or 1500. That is like 1.5 seconds, okay? 1.5 seconds delay for this function to run. I mean, this data to be obtained, okay? Basically, for this, whatever we have inside this thing, this set timeouts to run, okay? So now I'm going to define what I'm going to use, what is going to be my callback, okay? Let's say display, let's just throw something. Display data equals let's say function. Let's say that will take the data as the argument, and then we want to deal with that data we are getting back. So let's say is equal to, let's say, name, and then actually I would like to put it doesn't really matter. So let me say the data. We are going into the data object. You remember we define it as an object here, and then I'm retrieving the name, okay? I'm going to talk about objects here, okay, in a later class, in a separate class. So let's say console.log. Let me throw in the age as a string, and then let me give it a space, and then let's take in the data age. Okay, so we're just going to do that, and then let's call this function, okay, which is then going to make allow the callback function to run, okay? Fetch, then let's throw in parameter. It doesn't, the argument, the URL doesn't really matter, okay? Let's just say HTTPS, let's say coding university or coding uni, or it doesn't matter. Let's say Google. Let's say we are getting this data from Google API. Let's say /API/data. This is just we are simulating, okay? It's not real URL. So let's pass in the callback function, okay? Now let's see what happens. You see, right? You see what happened, right? So basically we simulated we simulated that we are retrieving data from an API, and then you saw that the data didn't show up immediately. It showed up after like a few seconds, like the number of seconds we define here. All right, because if you are fetching a data, usually when you fetch data like that from an API, let's assume this is the API, when the data return, it's going to return not like immediately, even though it's going to be like almost immediately, but I'm just kind of putting this set timeout to kind of show that there's a delay when we are retrieving the data. And then when the data got back, we then run this this callback function, then run, okay, because it needs this data value, okay, to run, okay. And that was what happened. So I'm going to make some changes and save this thing again so that you can then see, keep your eyes here, okay, and you will see that there's going to be some delay before we output the data to the browser console. So let's make some changes. Let's comment out this one, and actually let's comment out a bunch of things so that we can have some space to. Let's comment out this one. Let's comment this out. Let's comment this out. Let's comment this out. We are basically not calling those functions. Let's comment this out. I'm going to share the link to where you can download this code, in the description of this video. So let's come here and see what you can see, right? It's going to show up here. You see, we have it here because we put set timeout, and that gave us that delay, okay, so that we could see, something, that kind of resemble us fetching data from an API, okay. But this is essentially how callback functions, works, okay. So it's as simple as that. So far we have talked about functions, and we have used function declaration, and function expression, and we have also talked about callbacks or callback function, okay. Let's just say callbacks. Excuse me. So actually it's good to know the difference between, there are some key difference between the function declaration and function expression, okay. So function declaration are hoisted, okay. They are hoisted. It's important to know the hoisted. So basically what that means is that they are moved to the top of the containing scope, okay, during the compilation phase. And these allow you to call the function before it's actually declared in the code, okay. Whereas function expressions are not hoisted. They are just the direct opposite. They behave like any other variable assignment and can only be called after their declaration. So I'm going to prove that to you. So you can see here, right? This is Cathy, right? It's coming from line 66. Here this is function. That one is a function expression. Let's look for a function declaration. Okay, like this one is a function declaration. So that should go to, let's come here. So that is like line, where is it? South Africa. Line 38, right? So it's a function declaration. I'm going to show something. So if I move this show place function, if I move the execution to the top of this function before we declare this function, and I call this function, it's going to still work fine. Okay, let's see. You see, right? It works perfectly, even though it's showing us that it's running whatever we have displayed, within this function. But we called it even before we declared that function, and that is because it's moved the execution to the top of the containing scope when this code is being compiled. So that is really important. I thought that is really important for you to know. Okay. One thing though, in strict mode, a function declaration is only visible inside the code block in which it resides. Okay. And I'm going to, let's see how we can prove that. So let's say we have something like this. Let's say we have let's my age equals 21. Okay. Then let's say if my age, of course, if my age, move by, that is interesting. If my age is less than, let's say 18, Okay, now let's do something. Function, let's do a function declaration, welcome. Then let's do console.log. Let's log something. Let's just say hi there. Okay, hi there. Okay, so then let's do s. We want to do what? Another function declaration, function welcome. Then we are going to say similar thing. Let's just say similar thing. Copy, then paste. So here we're going to say hi folks. Doesn't really matter. Okay, so now let's call this function. Let's say welcome. Let's say welcome. Now we are calling the function welcome. Let's see what happens first. You see, right? It says hi folks. So meaning that we are still able to access the function. Okay, we have access to this function outside of this scope, right? So now let's do something. Let's because this is not strict mode. Okay, this is not strict mode. That's why we had access to this function. Now I'm going to make this strict code, and that is very simple. To make this strict code, you just need to come to the top of your code block and then just put use strict. Okay, you're going to say something like use strict. How do I write that? Use strict. Yeah, should be this. Okay, so let's have this and let's see what happens. Now we have use strict at the top. Let's see what happens. So basically we are making this we are basically having this code in strict mode. Let's see what happens. You see, right? It says welcome is not defined, okay? And every other thing still work fine, but welcome is not defined. Why is that? It's simply because, so first of all, let me help you understand what strict mode is, okay? What is strict mode in JavaScript? So strict mode is essentially a feature in JavaScript that helps you catch coding mistakes and prevent certain unsafe behaviors, okay? It enforces a stricter set of rules for variables, variable declarations, assignments, and other aspects of your code, okay? And basically, it just makes everything better, okay, than when you just writing things and then there are no rules guiding you and all that, okay? But how can we make this work in strict mode? It's simple. We just need to use a function expression, okay, instead of function declaration. So, but to do that, we can then declare welcome up here, and then let's declare without assigning a value, and then let's come here and have a function expression, basically reassigning this function, this variable welcome, and let's do the same thing for this one here. So if we have it this way, then we should be fine. So I'm gonna have that. So let's see what happens now in strict mode. You see, right? It works perfectly. That is because now we are using function expression, okay, in strict mode. So, but anyway, let's leave the strict mode there. It's okay. It's good for us. Okay. So now I'll quickly look at the concept of arrow function, which is what I use most times, okay? Arrow functions. I don't know how many people still use other ways of writing function, but anyway, it doesn't really matter. I mean, function expression, of course, we use that, but yeah, I like arrow functions, okay? And in JavaScript, arrow function is just a concise way to write functions, okay? Using the arrow, this thing here, the arrow forward syntax, like equal to, then greater than, so it gives you an arrow, okay? That's why we call it arrow functions, okay? It has a shorter syntax compared to regular function expressions and automatically captures the surrounding context this, the this keyword, okay? Which I'm going to be talking about in a greater detail later, okay? But anyway, this is not for this class. Let me remove it. Anyway, so let's just write an example, okay? Let's do a add function. Now we're just going to have something like this. Pass the parameters a, b, and let's say arrow function, and then let's just return something. Let's say return a plus b, okay? And it's as simple as that. The same thing we have here, we could, if we want to use the function expression, we will say something like let's add, but now I'm going to do let's sub so that it won't say I have already declared that add before. Let's say this, okay? So we're going to have something, actually, sorry. We're going to have something like this, then we'll say return a plus b, okay? The same thing, but here you can see, right, even though it's still short, kind of, but it's in 3 lines, but here it's in 1 line, and they are doing the same thing. Oh, sorry, I didn't put in the pass in the parameters. Okay, now let's see that they both work. Let's say console.log. Let's pass in that function add. Then let's pass in, let's say 3 and 6. That is going to be 3 plus 6, right? It's going to be 9. Let's see. You see, right? It's 9. Now let's use, instead of the add, let's use the sub, which we are still adding something, right? But just because of variable, the fact that we have used that add before, here we are using sub, but it's still going to be the same thing, okay? You can see, right? 9, okay? And they are coming from different lines, 132 and 133, okay? So it's as simple as that, okay? So arrow function is, is the choice way of writing functions in JavaScript, but still it depends on you, what you like, okay? For me, I like writing, my functions using the arrow function, and the arrow keyword, and you're going to see a lot of that, by the time we start talking about how to build the Monstack application, which I'm going to start within like next week, I think, okay? Within the next, let's say 7-8 days, okay? We're going to see the first episode of that, and we're going to see a lot of, really nice, elegant string of codes, okay? So I really hope you don't miss any of that episode. And I guess I will bring this class to the end today. We have done a lot. You should try and, review the video again to kind of understand and digest everything we talked about, relating to functions in JavaScript. So I would like to implore you to please like this video if you like it, and also share the video with your friends and cohorts. And please, you can as well share the channel, the Coding University channel, with your network so that we can reach more people, okay? And I guess that will be the end of today's class, and I'll see you in the next lecture. Bye.